This is Listening with Franklin Livingston, and our guest is Margeaux Appleton.
So we have been talking about the overall impact of religion, how younger people are not interested in it because a lot of the rituals don't make sense. Some of the text is taken literal, and then the other text is ignored at all. And every text we have in the Bible has a perspective, has a historical context, and it was written for a particular time and community. It reminds me of a gentleman, actually, long time ago. Then he was mid-20s, and he asked me. He shared, actually, didn't ask. He said he was part of a denominational church, and they light candles. I don't know why. Because he was never told about
why?
that,
He
right?
just light
And
candles.
even if he went to Sunday school, I don't think somebody taught him. So his dilemma is genuine. You keep lighting the candles and you don't know why. So what good does it do to a person like him? Nothing.
No, I think a big part of religion is a safety in almost, for lack of better words, putting the blame on or kind of pushing something off onto something else. So when something really bad happens, people can be like, oh, well, like, I'm going to pray, or I'm going to, give to this religion or this, because it'll help me get better.
Wait, when you say religion, you mean institutions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, either give or give like time, support extra time, go to more services, because it's like, okay, well, this really bad thing happened. I can almost hide myself in this world of, someone telling me things that I can believe and that I can rest on because other people do as well. Being able to find that like safe haven and comfortability in when in times of peril, being able to be like, oh, well, I'm religious, at least this, maybe I'll go to heaven, maybe this will happen, like ways to almost justify to themselves things that are going on.
When you were using this term religion, I think today we have used it more than ever before. That's why. So there's a biblical verse. Let me actually pull it up so I read the exact verse. It's from the New Testament, James chapter 1, verse 27. It says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstrained from the world. Now, in that particular culture, orphans and widows were the most overlooked communities. Going back to the same idea, every text had a context. So if we were to take out the principle of reaching out to those people who did not have voice or did not have maybe means to support themselves, who would that be? That might not be orphans right away or widows. Now, widows used to be a part of, not like in that time, later on, and in the developed eras after wars. A lot of women used to lose their husbands, and, right? So, if the text is telling us to go look for orphans and women, do we literally have to go and look for those two kinds of people?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's why it's very important when we say I'm taking the scripture literally. What does that mean?
Does that mean? Because if you're taking it literally, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Because if you were, like, you could take it literally, but I guarantee you I've never met anyone who is. taking the text
People
exactly.
claim. Some people just claim it.
Yeah, because to take it literally, you have to take the text for exactly what the text is, and every piece of the text, not just certain pieces. And I don't think
But
I've
if
ever...
you don't find an orphan, then what? You'll say, okay, hey, I did my job. There's no orphan in my community, and
Yeah,
there's
it's like,
no
what
way
do you do
Yeah.
from there? It's such a...
Similarly,
It's such an interesting thing.
historically, women did not have their own identity.
Very true.
Like,
Women are still working towards
sure,
that
but
in a
you
way.
mean what I mean? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
In that particular era, the Apostle Paul, when he's talking about women and their authority, because you have a community within a community.
Yeah.
That's these people were, and the state and the wider community was against Christians. They were already doing things that were considered wrong in a way because uh, these poor Christians were more caring and loving and sharing and giving. And that's the foundational principle of Christianity. You love your God and love your neighbor.
Yes.
And it starts from the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible.
Yes.
So Judeo Christian values are very simple. And then, of course, like you have these expressions of faith and lighting the candles, or what else we do? I saw actually a reel came up. I don't know what tradition that is. A guy, priest kind of guy, he has a wet cloth with a stick. It's really wet. I mean, I wish it was. And especially the way we have weather these days. So he probably dipped it in a bucket. It was so wet. And he's just like splashing that on women's faces. And these are elderly women. And then he's giving them a cross, not giving them, like putting a cross in front of them so they can kiss. To me, it was a bit funny that you just splash water like this, and it's a lot of water. It's not even, and then you have to kiss the cross. In there might be someone who could go forward and say, "Why are we doing that? What's the logic behind it?"
Yeah.
Right? And if there's no answer or compelling answer or satisfactory answer, of course that person's not going to come to your church.
Absolutely. And there's so many different religions too. I went to a religious place. I don't know exactly what it's called for one of
Christian religion? Or...
No, Greek.
Okay. Greek Orthodox?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe. I'm not exactly sure. It was a very long time ago now. Again, don't want to assume things, but we were on our knees in the carpet with our face down for one of the sections of their ceremony, and it was so interesting. And it was something that's like, why? And like, because every religion has their things that they do. It's so fascinating to experience others and be like, where is that coming from?
Yeah, no, I think that's very important. And without that, it's difficult to really embrace something and talk about it. But the best thing one could do is, if it doesn't make sense and you still like the tradition and somebody asks you and you don't know, or you are confused about a lot of things, that you hold on to the basic foundational stuff. And that opens up another conversation of hospitality and sharing. Mm-hmm. So when your family moved to this community,
yes,
right? The reason I was surprised, if this community was Christian, it doesn't matter what form of Christianity, they were supposed to be having events, or event can't, it doesn't have to be a really grand event. Event means ways, opportunities to welcome your family, to make you guys more comfortable and give you guys a sense of belonging. And so that trust could have been developed right away rather than years. But I don't know if there was something like that happened there.
There were probably some things like that, some gatherings and such, but still in a town with that's not big. It is a very small town, but there's still, different parts of the town. It's hard for everyone to know when new people move everywhere and if they want to be a part of things, or because there are some other families I know of that moved as well but didn't want to become a part of the greater community. They were very like, oh my gosh, like we only see them at like graduation, that family, because they don't come to events because that's not something they're interested in. So I think it's a kind of a toss-up of there were events, but where were the events?
Right, right.
All of those things.
I think, yeah. So when I was in the event, there was a church I knew, borderline cult, very evangelical type,
Yes.
and very white. Because I think they probably had one black guy because he was married to a white woman.
Mm.
Other than that, I don't know if they had other ethnicities. And they used to be big on the events, even their events of this getting together as their version of communion, like the biblical type where you sit and eat for real, was just among themselves. Now, I thought these people, their events are for them, because even if a stranger walks in, he or she won't be comfortable.
Exactly.
Because
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
That there were events, and even though my mom did attend some, like, they're not events that are like, oh, you're new, let's make this about learning about you and you learning about us. It's like, oh, you're new, okay, cool, you can listen to me talk to my friend about something we did 2 days ago. Kind of like being the new kid in a high school or an elementary school. It's the same thing. Like, when everyone's already close, it's not that they're, like, outwardly unaccepting or that my family was shunned or that my mom, like, was not accepted. It was just that you don't always, if you're talking to one of your friends and just someone random comes up, you're not, as much as everyone would like to say they are so open accepting, not every time are you going to be like, oh, wow, let's learn about you now. You feel like I'm having a conversation with my friend. Polite.
Yes. But, okay, you're here. Why don't sit here? How was the ride and all that superficial stuff.
Yes.
It's like we shake hands with a lot of people and we end up saying, nice meeting you or nice to meet you, but do we really mean it?
Do we really mean it? There are so many things like that, including just like something generally like compliments. Like sometimes you see someone, or I know I've witnessed like someone I knew go up to one of my friends, and they were talking. They're like, "Oh my god, I love your shirt. Oh my god, I love your like skirt." And like they both have very opposite styles. They may enjoy it, but they're not gonna wear that. That's not like, that's a polite thing to do. Is when you see someone for the first time in a long time, you give a compliment because that's a nice thing to do, and not that you inherently don't mean it, but how much do you mean it? Or is it more of a just formality over like, wow, their pants are really so incredible that I feel the need to comment on them? Or is it like, oh, they're nice pants, I'm going to tell them that so they feel appreciated right now?
I think that the communities, especially like New York City is different, as we were talking about it this morning. But in general, New York City is not the whole United States. Most of the country is more, you have a community, you have a family, you have community gatherings, and you have a lot of things going on, starting from a grocery store to your physical therapy, depending what age groups you're in. Yeah. Those are the places where people who claim to be people of faith, people who consider themselves Christians, be open and welcoming. Not welcoming, again, going back to you go to church and there'll be ushers standing and say, welcome. That's it. And you're there for an hour and go back. And they might be really thinking, why are you there? Haven't seen you before. And some people might be thinking, how much donation will you be giving? So that term welcome doesn't mean anything to me, to be honest.
I think welcome just means that, like, it's something that is physically accessible to you. You are welcome, you can show up
Mhm.
and enter the room, but emotionally you're not going to feel safe.
Right.
But you're allowed to physically walk through the door.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to look at you weird, but you're allowed to enter. So it's like being inclusive without actually being inclusive, which
Mm-hmm.
is something that just, grinds my gears a lot and is something I think about quite frequently. People or places that are like, I'm very open, I support this group, I support this group, and then make negative comments about that group. Not necessarily intentionally in a way to hurt them, but just like passing in their everyday life. And you're like, okay, so what do you mean by that?
Long time ago, I heard this from someone that we as Americans are so comfortable that we prefer sympathy over empathy. A lot of us don't know what empathy is. And sympathy means, oh my God, you're poor. Okay, I'm going to donate my old clothes to you. Pay 10 or $20 as a donation to a food bank or food pantry and feel good about that.
I think it comes to a big thing with like difference. When you see people different than you in any sense, it doesn't mean good or bad difference. It's just when there's someone who is different from you, a lot of times sympathy is offered, even if it's someone who's different than you in a very positive way. You're like, wow, that's amazing. Like, oh, so glad. It's very like sympathetic to their situation and what they're going through. And I think some groups or some places don't need that sympathy because they're
sympathy could also,
even if it's just like in a caring way, almost like people who are different are like, oh my gosh, you must struggle because you're different, which yes and no, but everyone has struggles. So it's just kind of a thing that almost feels extra pointed out, like, oh, you must be struggling extra because you're different. No, I'm struggling just as much as you are, no matter. And I mean, this can apply to religious groups and so many other things.
Yeah. I mean, it can go beyond. It can, I think it goes to basic human rights. Sympathy is great, but it can also create an awkward environment because the person you've been or community you've been sympathetic to could also feel a sense of pity, or they could, or they might feel, or it might come across that we don't respect their dignity. Because when we talk about humans being equal, in what way? So, as compared to sympathy, this is a very interesting example comes to my mind. I haven't personally seen such neighborhoods, but somebody once mentioned, I think it was North Carolina or somewhere. So if there is a Somalian family living in a white suburb, right? Would you be sympathetic to them or empathetic? Because that family could be high middle class, might have a PhD, the guy might be a professor or something like that. But his accent, the appearance doesn't make him look one of us. So the majority there, how do they view? Would they say, "I'm so sorry for you to be a Somalian"? Right? That I don't think would go well. Empathy is, I am trying to stand in your shoes. I'm trying to understand what it means to be a Somalian after, if Somalian male is driving an expensive SUV and passing through a cop who hasn't seen a lot of those Somalians driving an expensive SUV. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think empathy is so important, and what I try and do is I'm a very, very empathetic person. I'm very emotional. I've always been very emotional, and I'm very empathetic. I like to try and understand everyone's point of views, even if they so different from mine, and I love to listen to people and hear them and be like, oh my gosh, though I don't know what you're going through, like I bet there are struggles there. in some way, and I support you in whatever struggles you come about. Not, oh, the fact that you're different is a struggle, because that might not be the struggle.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different things, and I think
So
that
what you're
also,
saying is focusing on the struggles we all have, but our struggles are different in its
yeah, and focusing
nature.
on the fact that they have struggles, and even if they were the same exact demographic in the neighborhood, that they would still have struggles. So being empathetic to, oh my goodness, struggles are struggles. If you need help with any of your struggles, you just moved here. Struggles can increase with travel, with change. It's like not singling out because of any certain demographic other than just being like, oh, you traveled and picked up and moved. That's a struggle in itself. And there are other struggles that can come with that. So, like, how can I best support you and lift you up in that? I think there's just such this stigma of differences and what that means and stereotypes. And I don't like that. I think it's also, people are very judgy. People judge very much so, like, don't judge a book by its cover, but everyone does, even if you don't want to. I'm guilty. I've judged people, and then I'm like, oh my god, I didn't mean to do that. Like, it was just like a brain thing, and it's so weird how that
What do you
happens.
think people are most judged on? What are the bases?
I think I can only speak on my
Yeah, no,
personal
because in
situations.
Massachusetts, I'm more interested.
Personally, I am a queer disabled woman, right? Which puts me in 3 smaller demographics that have,
Explain that to me more. I have no clue what that means.
So I'm queer. I'm pansexual, which means I am attracted to all genders, or if someone identifies as not a gender, I don't really consider that in my attraction process. If I'm attracted to someone, I'm attracted to someone, regardless of their anything regarding gender. If they classify as one, if they change genders, if they don't feel like they fit into a gender super well, they're a person, and if I'm attracted to them, I'm attracted to them. That's
So
what
that's being queer.
that's pansexual.
Oh, that's
which is
pansexual,
under the
sorry.
umbrella of
Okay.
queer, LGBTQ plus, all of the different
Gotcha.
classifications there. But I specifically am pansexual, which is very awesome. I'm attracted to everyone, and I like people based on people, not anything regarding gender. Not that that's better or worse or anything than any other sexual orientation, but I feel like that is something people get heavily judged on. Sexual orientations in general. If someone is queer, people feel sometimes like, oh no, if you're queer, are you attracted? Do you have a crush on me? And you're like, no, I just
Oh, okay, okay.
like
So
like queer
so
in
the
that
person
sense.
you were
Like,
in communication with might think, since you were attracted to everyone, you might be attracted to me.
yes,
So that
and
might
it's
make
like,
them uncomfortable.
yes, it would make them uncomfortable because, like, let's say I'm female presenting, I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm with a friend who's a cis female who is straight, and they're like, oh, but since you also like girls, I don't like girls. I'm like, that's okay. That doesn't mean we can't be friends. It's just a very, like, classification in it. Some religions push on it more, and that's just sexuality in itself. So I am under the queer umbrella, which is
That's your one.
that's one of the things I'm under. I'm also a woman who is another smaller demographic, and I'm also disabled. I have a few chronic conditions actually that cause me to be not super physically capable a lot of the time. I have POTS, which is a neurological and heart condition where I don't have sensors to measure my blood pressure correctly, and my heart rate will spike. Even just the simple task of going from sitting to standing up causes my heart rate to spike so much that I can faint just from standing out of a chair if I'm not extra careful or not taking care of my salt and electrolytes and stuff like that. As well as there's a lot of stuff that comes with that. I have arthritis and pretty chronic pain. I'm in a lot of pain all the time, especially in my joints, which makes it a little harder to move, function, With POTS, I get very dizzy. It's hard to stand on my feet for long periods of time. So it is a disability that is impactful to my everyday life. A lot of people with POTS use mobility aids or even wheelchairs. I am frequently in the hospital and going through checks and stuff. And I don't let that affect me as much as I can let something like that not affect me. But it's still very much so part of my identity that a lot of people wouldn't guess. I'm not outwardly in a wheelchair, which a lot of people feel like, oh, you have to be in a wheelchair to be disabled, which is not the case at all. There are so many invisible disabilities that people judge so heavily. I can be in events and have to sit down, and people will be like, well, it's no fair. Why do you get to sit? I've gotten fired from jobs. I've gotten let go from jobs. They would never say they fired me because that is not legal. Right. But they have been like, hey, we can't keep giving you special treatment. People are thinking we're picking a favorite. I'm like, well, no, I actually just have a medical condition, and I was in the midst of getting diagnosed with that. I mean, probably during the period where I worked at this one specific place, I was in and out of the hospital maybe 9 or 10 times in the span of 4 months. Just pretty frequent to be in the hospital. Yeah. And they were like, yeah, but you can't sit because we don't let anyone else sit. I'm like, I understand that, but given the fact that it is dangerous for me to stand for long periods of time, I will need that accommodation. And they're like, well, then until you can get all of the official paperwork, which takes years and immense amounts of money to get diagnosed with a condition and to get diagnosed with a disability and get the paperwork on that, it took me 6.5 years. 6.5 years, and probably, I think I totaled it up at some point, over 300 hospital visits. Not doctor's appointments, hospital visits. Being like, hey guys, something is wrong, please help me. And then being like, well, you need to go see a cardiologist and a neurologist and get this test and this test and this test. And these 3 tests you have to get diagnosed with this condition are not covered by insurance. So you're going to have to pay out of pocket for that, which, though my family was comfortable, medical bills are so incredibly expensive. And healthcare is not super accessible for everyone. And there was a chunk of time where my father was unemployed and my family didn't have insurance. So that was about a 2-year chunk of me not really being able to go to appointments because I didn't have that resource. And that's just such a thing people get judged on, is conditions are being like, okay, well, if you want to work with that, you need all of this official documentation, but it's so hard to get documentation on those things. So I find in my life have found run-ins with each of those categories that I would like put myself in: queer, female, disabled. Like, I've had issues in all 3 of those categories. Like, everyone has issues in whatever demographic they are in that have shaped me, that have, been looked down on because I'm a woman or because I'm queer, or been let go from jobs because I'm disabled. Those are personal struggles that I deal with that not everybody I meet or speak to deals with. So I'm not going to say I know someone else's struggles. I'm not going to sit here and say that I know everything you've been through in your struggles because I have struggles. It's just saying that I have XYZ that caused me a lot of issues and got me to where I am. And no matter what demographic, class, economic or social class or race you are, you have struggles. Though widespread, or in certain areas, some demographics may have less struggles than others. Or obviously, like,
less highlighted
struggles, or struggles that are less pressing, almost, in ways like certain demographics don't always have their lives at stake, and that doesn't mean that they don't have struggles. It just means that their struggles are different from someone who does have their life. Like, I wouldn't go up to someone who is none of those things and be like, well, you have it easy because you don't deal with these things I struggle with. But I also know that there are times where I have it hard in ways that they will never, ever be able to understand. Not because they don't want to, or not because they don't sympathize, but because you can't experience something if you don't live it, And that's why, you know, struggles are so widespread, and a big thing with race being like the argument between like, okay, well, these people need this right now, but we have struggles too. Yes, we know that, but right this second, they're not important. Right this second, you are physically safe in your demographic, when some races are not. They're not safe just for being the race they were born in the place they are. And a lot of the people who are like, oh, well, what about me, are safe right now, or as safe as possible in that whole demographic of race. People who are white are normally the most protected just against any sort of enforcement. And that's terrible, but it is how it is. So they're kind of on the safer side a lot of the time. And that doesn't mean that they don't still have struggles or run into struggles.
No, I was going to say that
race.
If we look at the fear of being killed,
yeah,
or death, we might think, okay, they're going to die because they don't have a place to live, or their shelter closed down, or there are just no money for food. They don't have that. But someone could be white, might not be able to afford health care, might not have access to health care, and they might die because of that. Right? So they both are fighting for their lives.
Absolutely, just in different ways.
In different ways.
Like, I know that there are things I'm more scared of and more fearful of, and my thing, but like, if I'm walking alone at night, I'm mostly scared because I'm like a woman, and because I present on the more queer side, and some places aren't accepting of that. But the one thing I'm like, okay, as a woman at night, at least I am white, because sometimes that is helpful in those situations, and not in the sense of like, sorry, trying to formulate my sentence, being that I'm still scared of things, but there are certain things that aren't as scary, like when I run into law enforcement, if I get pulled over, statistically, white people get off easier with law enforcement, and that's awful, terrible, but it is statistically proven to be a fact, right? So I know that if I had a run-in with the police, I would automatically just be a little bit safer than someone of a different race. Not that I'm still not every day fighting for my life as a person on this planet, in this world, with, all of the responsibilities of being a human, and food and water and shelter and sickness and just physical ability, all the other things that come with just being a human. But I know in that specific situation, I am safer than other demographics.
I think that more goes in the direction of justice.
Yeah, and
it reminds me of a picture. So there's a picture. There are three kids. They are trying to look over the fence. And there's a tall kid who doesn't need any support. And then the middle kid needs a box. So when somebody places a box, the kid can look beyond the fence. The smallest kid in height, if you give him or her a box, still the kid can't see what's over the fence.
Exactly.
And the kid needs 2 or 3 boxes. I don't remember this picture, a long time ago I saw. And the concept behind it was, this is justice.
Yeah.
Justice, when they have justice, all of them can see what they're wanting to see.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're talking about, that everyone has struggle. But the justice is that we all have the same measures when it comes to our basic human dignity,
Absolutely. And in certain
basic human
situations,
right.
rights in every situation could be different, but it's like, how do you, and I don't know the answer to this, and no one does, and it's something I think that like we fight for every day, is how do we make things fair for everyone, which is the world's question, how do you give
Right.
justice to every single minority and demographic? Or is it just like there are some demographics that in certain situations are handled differently just because of deep-rooted things or convenience or whatever it is? How do we make sure that doesn't happen? Because there's so much that goes behind it. It's like, okay, to make sure that doesn't happen, you have to then make sure everyone at least hits this baseline. But how do you even do that without it being unfair? And it's just this constant, like, balancing scale. I like to think of it as one of the weighted scales. It's like, like pound of bricks or a pound of feathers, a pound of feathers would be way more feathers than it would be bricks, but it's the same weight, so it evens out. It's like, how do you find a measurement for everything in the world and find a baseline that is even for everyone? It is so hard, and we're just, community is
I think the
not
policy
a world where it's like
policy
able.
policymakers of any given community or nation, uh, who are rooted in some sort of religion
Mm-hmm.
in its better form. And I don't mean by rituals and these bells and whistles.
Yeah.
The foundational principles I mentioned, they can do a better job. Because almost, now here, I'm going to go a bit global, almost every religion, which is on the basis of, say, monotheistic God,
Mm-hmm.
uh, would teach people to be more sacrificial, more loving, caring, forgiving,
Mm-hmm.
right? The problem becomes an issue is where it's not practiced or somehow understood, maybe understood and not practiced,
Yeah.
and while dealing with the other people. Now, going back to the idea of Christian principles, Christianity, especially when it comes to Jesus Christ, the New Testament, it's all about how you are to be with others. And it's way more than an average person could do. Unless, so what is the faith, right?
Yeah.
The faith is whatever I do it for the higher being. You call it God or whatever term you use. That someone, I believe, is out there looking for me. And then these teachings are to guide us how to do those things at a very grassroots level.
Yeah.
Do you know this Good Samaritan narrative?
Yes.
Right. Almost every Christian knows. So the guy who was beaten by these thieves or bad guys, robbers, was the most poor and marginalized because I forgot his background. He was not the privileged class.
Mm-hmm.
But the gentleman who helped him was from the privileged class, but did not represent the government or the priesthood. So, religion, in Jesus' teachings throughout the Bible, the people in question were religious people, Pharisees and Sadducees and these priest people. So Jesus is telling a story that I think first guy, I forgot who was the first guy, some sort of official. Second guy was a priest who was like, oh, I'm going to go and do the mass or whatever they had to do. And why should I help this guy? The third guy was more like a middle class person who had a donkey. So probably he wasn't the poorest. That was the mode of transportation. And then he had a couple of bucks in that time he gave to the innkeeper. So that's the middle class Jesus is telling, helping the one that's wounded and doesn't have any support in that particular moment. And in the end of this whole thing, uh, the principle is love your neighbor yourself.
Mm-hmm.
There are tons of texts starting from Matthew where he says if somebody asks you for a shirt, give two, don't ask back. If uh, somebody takes your money, don't expect it to come back, and help those or be good to those who cannot return your favor.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it ends up becoming the community or the cult I was saying, where some churches, what they'll do is they're so close that they know I'm going to cook a meal for her, she's going to cook a meal for me, and our kids are going to play together, and we are good people of God, we believe in God, we love the Lord. There's a particular language, I forgot that, and those phrases, I don't know what that means when people say, oh, she loves the Lord, my daughter loves the Lord, she's really godly young woman. Because that is not in alignment with the scripture.
No, and also what does saying someone is a godly person, are you comparing them to God? Are you saying they follow blindly? Like, what are you exactly implying by saying someone is a godly person? And that's not that it's a bad thing, but it's why is that said? What are you trying to make us think of that person when you call them godly like that?